We would just like to welcome you here, how to create an atmosphere of, we tricked you, we said compliance, but what it really is purpose. And that's the most important thing, and we'll be talking about that here really soon. So if you could just put in the chat your name and what you do for work, and what is your biggest challenge at work, because we want to try to address those challenges as we go forward with this webinar. We'll just go right ahead. So I'm Becky Curtis, and I am the Director of Strategic Relationships at Override. I also have Pain Coach Academy, and we have been helping people with chronic pain for the last 17 years. And I'm really glad to be here and to talk about how we can create an atmosphere of purpose for each and every injured worker.
And I'm Paul Curtis. I share a last name with Becky because she's my mother. So I've gotten to go along on this ride a little bit with her. And I'm a pain coach at Override, and I'm also the head instructor and head of mentoring at Pain Coach Academy. So I train a lot of coaches in some of the things we're going to talk about today. This is kind of a condensed version of what we do, but I wanted to give you all some tools to just engage with the people that you interact with, right? I know, first and foremost, I just want to acknowledge how much I appreciate the work that you all do in the workers' comp system. I know it's a big challenge working in that field, working in that space. And so today I'm hopeful that you'll come away with some maybe some tools you can use that'll help you with some of the challenges you face on a day-to-day basis. So this is a bit of a bait and switch, like Becky said. We're talking not as much about compliance today. We will talk about compliance some, but we really want to go into talking about purpose and how that can really change the whole dynamic so that people are compliant because of being aligned with their purpose. And I want to start by talking about compliancy and kind of what that means. Definition, I'm kind of a word nerd, so I like to get into the meaning of something. What does it actually mean to be compliant? And it's defined as a disposition to yield to others. And so, in your work, I'm sure you work with people that are in this place of maybe they tend to just kind of, yield to what other people want from them. And these are the types of patients or clients that often lack the willpower to change. They have a hard time finding the initiative to get out of the ruts that they're in, and they often get stuck in the workers' comp system for many years. I know in my coaching career, I've worked with a lot of these folks they're just stuck. They're stuck on a lot of medications. They're stuck kind of chasing the quick fix for their pain. They're stuck in anger and resentment. They tend to blame others for their situation, and they often feel really victimized by the place they're in. So love to hear, in the chat, if this sounds familiar to you. This is often what happens with people that are overly compliant. So next we have, on the other end of the spectrum, there's always kind of a full spectrum here that we see. On the other end of the spectrum is defiance. And as you'd imagine, defiance is defined as a challenge to fight, invitation to combat. And I would imagine if you work in the workers' comp space, there's probably some of that too, right? There's people that are really struggling, that are often, one of the characteristics we see a lot is these are people who often wish that other people would change. So, the only reason I'm in this situation is because of what this person did to me. This surgeon that messed up my surgery, or this family member that did me wrong, or the employer that set me down this path. So that's often, one of their characteristics. And they also, defiant patients often also stay in their workers' comp system for many years. Something that they get stuck in. They get stuck in a rut. And they tend to be angry, spiteful, and hardened. So we have either end of the spectrum here of the types of people and I shouldn't say types of people, but these are the things that sort of come alive in people sometimes when they're struggling. So what we need is, talking about the need to change. Where does the need to change come from? And we find that people who are compliant have a hard time changing, and people who are defiant have a hard time changing and growing as individuals. They often have a hard time finding work, finding purpose, finding meaning in their life. And so the thing that we found that's really helpful for that is to create an environment in what we call the Goldilocks zone. Anybody know that story? So what is that? What is that, Mom? What is the Goldilocks zone?
Not too hot, not too cold. I remember seeing, I asked one time for my records to be copied off and given to me, and I could see non-compliant, patient is non-compliant, patient is non-compliant. I don't remember ever being angry and bitter, but I didn't always want to do what they wanted me to do. And, so I don't think that's always a bad thing, but I like what you say. This Goldilocks zone is not too hot, not too cold, just a place where they feel safe to change, to make changes.
It's a good way to put it. Yeah, they feel safe. And you find that people that are too compliant, they don't feel safe because none of the decisions they make come from them. They just kind of get drug along with whatever anybody else wants for them, what their doctor wants for them, what their adjuster wants, what their case manager wants, what their family member wants for them. And they never really take the initiative to do what they really want to do. And then we have people on the defiant end of things that just battle the whole way, right? They're just in constant conflict, and it's always someone else's fault. So that just right is purpose. And the definition of purpose is proper function for which something exists. And I think it's really important to recognize we're all here for something. It's something you find when you work with people that are really struggling. Is the main reason they're struggling is they're not aligned with what they're here to do. They're stuck. And people become more willing to change when they know why they're here. It changes the whole dynamic because no longer are they pushing against something or putting all their energy into fighting against something. Instead, they're just aligned with what they're meant to do. And these types of clientele, they usually exit the workers' comp system. They're ready to close their case and say, hey, we're good. We're good to go. Or like the counterpart I have here today, they go on to work within the workers' comp system and contribute to the well-being of humanity. So that's a really beautiful thing we see is that often people that really find that purpose, they go on to do really amazing things. They change the world for people that have gone through what they've gone through. And there's a lot of meaning in that, a lot of purpose. They tend to be very empathetic, compassionate, driven, and have all these good qualities that are constantly coming out. In contrast to often, what we see with people that are really struggling. People that are struggling have a lot of negative qualities that come out: anger, resentment, blame, rumination, all that kind of stuff. So I want to talk a little bit about the source of change. Where does that come from? Where do people find the kind of their inner fire for change and grow through it? And you guys might be surprised to hear me say that change doesn't come by taking action. We think that action alone is what leads to change. And, I remember early in my coaching career, I would say this a lot. They're like, oh, you just need to get moving. If this client would just get moving. And I found that it's sort of like putting the cart before the horse. When you try to get someone to take action before the source of change has actually been explored. So change is propelled by unique qualities that fuel the action. So this is what needs to come out in people first. They need to become aware of the unique qualities that are within them, that are at their disposal. It's the ultimate tool for change. And Mom, I want to let you speak to this a little bit, because you went through quite a transformation where, you were stuck, I know, for a little bit. And there were some unique qualities in you that came out that created Take Courage Coaching, that created Pain Coach Academy, that created these places that help others. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about like what qualities came out in you, and who helped you, kind of bring those out.
Yeah. So after my work-related rollover car accident, breaking my neck and developing burning nerve pain from the neck down, I was sent through a functional restoration program where I learned that pain is an experience and that there's so many things that can be done about my pain. There were things that I could do. I came away from there knowing that it's no longer on someone else, but it's on me. And that was a really, really big change for me. I remember feeling like, a little bit of resistance at first. I remember feeling like there needs to be some kind of surgery or something like that could take this away. And somebody else certainly has an answer for this. And then just coming into acceptance, to me, that was the missing piece for me, was acceptance. It's like somebody in a swimming pool, you can float or you can flail. And I had been flailing. And then when you surrender to it and you just, you just are in it without all of the flailing, it calms the nervous system. And I started seeing that there were things that I could do. And then during that time, the pain psychologist that was there saw something in me, asked me what it was that I wanted to do when I grew up. I remember the question. I remember that day. I was about 3 years after my accident. And I want to tell you, that is the first time that anybody had asked me what I wanted to do for a career. I think everybody just assumed, you have a spinal cord injury, you're disabled, you go on disability, and then you just do your life from there, from a place of disability. But he didn't see it that way. And I remember visioning with him, talking to him about my thoughts, my goals, my passions. I told him if I ever get my own pain figured out, I want to spend the rest of my life helping other people that have pain. And I remember his encouragement to send me toward coaching. He said he felt like that was kind of the missing link. And then he supported me along the way as I developed Take Courage Coaching and that is now Override. And just, he saw something in me, and he also expected for me to have purpose and meaning in my life. And that was the first person that had that expectation for me. And it was powerful. I still remember it. That was 20 years ago, 17 years ago. So powerful to see that in someone, to expect that rather than laying in the back room, that they're going to have a purpose and a meaning in their life.
And that encouragement really creates a ripple.
It does.
It's an amazing, and it's neat to see the results of it. We all have the ability every day to create some kind of ripple in someone's life. And I know those of you that work in the workers' comp system, like, you have an amazing opportunity. I know it's like filled with all kinds of challenges. So, that positive action, it comes from positive qualities. And I heard, in your example, the positive qualities in you were courage and acceptance and compassion for other people that are going through this, and determination, a lot of resilience and determination to make things go and make things happen. So everyone has unique qualities that are maybe different than that. There's compassion or courage, willpower, presence, patience. All these things can come out in people. And if we want to see those good actions in our patients and the people that we interact with, we need to learn to recognize and cultivate those best qualities. And so today we're going to this isn't just going to be me rambling for an hour, luckily for you. We're going to spend some time really digging deep into this and practicing it together. You know, another thing to touch on here, I think we can all agree, at least I would hope we'd all agree, that there is a deep purpose to life. It's undeniable, you know, when you've really experienced it. And I'd love to hear, if you want to type into the chat, maybe a time when you had, you know, something that you took up, and maybe it was later in life, you know, you discovered something, you discovered a new hobby. Maybe you discovered that you love golf and you're like, wow, this is amazing. This is so fun. This is my thing. I'm going to do this forever. You know, maybe it was a new career you found where you're like, oh, I'm so good at this. You know, it's like, I just came out of the womb ready to do this. Or maybe it's a relationship, you know, where you met someone and you were instantly connected. It didn't take any effort to build and foster the relationship. So I'd love to hear if you guys could type it in the chat, maybe some examples of that in your life. And we've all had that at some point or another. And think about how much effort you had to put into it. Usually that kind of thing feels pretty effortless. Mom, do you have anything like that you just kind of took off with?
Yeah, two things after my accident, which is funny because they both could have been done before, but I just didn't find the time and energy, and I didn't have the interest. But I remember going snorkeling with Dad and Hannah after my accident, and just laying there. We were in Hawaii, and seeing all the fish and the coral, and then swimming with baby dolphins. And, you know, it was something that Dad had tried to get me to do lots of times with him. And I'm like, I think I'm kind of scared of the water. I don't want to put my face down in the water and everything. And then when I did it, it was so amazing. Yeah, that's just the first thing that came to mind. And it's maybe not what you had in mind, but
no, that's great. That's the beauty of exploring this stuff. It's usually stuff that's even more fun than what you would imagine. Like snorkeling. How cool. You got to see what goes on under the water. There's a whole world under there that we don't see all the time. So in doing that and doing the snorkeling, how did it feel to engage with it?
It felt amazing. Yeah. Especially the day that we swam with a whole pod of dolphins, including some babies and everything. It was really amazing.
Mm-hmm. That's
and
cool.
I felt really accomplished because, of course, I had Hannah on one side of me and Dad on the other side of me, because, you know, I don't have use of my left arm. But I felt like, oh, this is something that I can do, and look forward to doing it anytime I can.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you know, and for you, it was effortless, right? It was really easy to get started. And there's some things we love that have a bit of challenge at the very beginning, you know. And I'm sure putting the flippers on, getting your snorkel all situated,
Dad had to do all of that.
Yeah, trying to walk with those flippers on, right?
Yeah,
you're tripping all over yourself. But once you get in the water, you're flowing. So
yeah.
So realize that, you know, working with people is like that often, where when you first start, it's bumpy, you know, and you might get pushback, you might get resistance. And I would encourage everyone just to stay patient with it. And the things we teach you today, if you do them over the long term, it will lead to something different. It will lead to a totally different experience in the way that you interact with people. And you'll find that your what used to be like negative, confrontational, stressful interactions turn into, you know, a really great relationship where you bond and connect, and things flow from there. You know, your patience will start to change. So the doorway, let's talk about what kind of door do we want to step into here? The doorway is to recognize someone's character strengths. So those qualities need to come first. So we're going to do a little bit of practice together. So we're going to work with Albert. And for this scenario, we're just going to go through his scenario. And then we're going to call out some good qualities that we see in Albert. And then we're going to imagine a little bit together, like what action steps would Albert make if he were alive in these qualities, if he were living through the strengths that you see in him. And it might be a little bit of a challenge. Albert's got a lot of challenges.
He does.
So we're going to go through this a little bit together, and then just dialogue a little bit about what we're seeing in Albert that is good. So Albert is a patient of yours. 4 years ago, while working as a truck driver, he was involved in a violent car accident in which the other driver was killed. He's developed chronic head and neck pain and seems to have no physical cause. Albert says that he just can't help but be angry, frustrated, and full of dread about the future. He says he was once the proud provider for his family and now feels worthless since he can't work. He also says that when he was working, life had meaning, but now that he's injured, he doesn't know where his life is going. And Albert says to you, "It's been so hard to get my MRI scheduled. I know there's something wrong and no one is taking me seriously. I'm sick of being treated like I don't know what I'm talking about. I know, I wish I had a button I could push so you could feel what I feel." It's intense.
Yeah.
This is hard. It's hard to see.
I've heard this conversation before.
Mm-hmm. I have too. Has anyone else heard this conversation? So let's think about like a character strength that we see in Albert, something good that we see in him. Does anyone want to share what are some good qualities that you see in Albert from what we know about him here?
The one thing I see is he's a hard worker. He likes to provide for his family. Anastasia says, one good quality that Albert has is he's able to clearly vocalize his feelings. Some people are not able to vocalize their issues and concerns clearly. And that is something that he's doing.
It's a great observation. It's hard to be on the receiving end of that. I know I felt like attacked sometimes when people are in this mode. Like, oh man, you tend to kind of take it personal sometimes. At least I do when someone, really lets you have it.
Mm-hmm.
But really, it's really neat of you, Anastasia, to be able to recognize, like, he's able to share where he's at. You know what you're getting with Albert. Any other strengths you see in him? What are some good qualities that Albert has, kind of laying under the surface?
I see that he's persistent. He's continually persisting to try to find an answer for his problem. He's determined to get back to providing for his family.
Yeah, very persistent. He wants answers. He wants to figure it out.
I remember often feeling like I wish I had a button. I still wish that sometimes. I wish I had a little button that I could just let people feel for just a second. Just what he's wanting is he's wanting somebody to understand. He's wanting understanding.
Yeah, he does. He wants understanding. He wants empathy. That's what true empathy is, right? It's doing our best to put ourselves in someone else's shoes. Another thing that we see in Albert is he's very knowledgeable. And I know this this one might be a little bit hard to see, but one thing to take into consideration is someone's own life experience. If you think back to your life experiences, they usually come to you through challenges that you go through.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, Becky's example, she's an expert in chronic pain. And she doesn't have like a PhD in chronic pain from a university, but she has her own, expertise. I always tell people, if you've gone through something like chronic pain, you automatically have, the highest level of education you could possibly have in something. And so
it's called the School of Hard Knocks.
It really is. It really is. Robert has that, and we need to respect it, right? We may be in disagreement at times of where he's at. He may want some things that are not good for him.
Mm-hmm.
Mom, do you have any examples of that, of like times when you maybe had something in mind that wouldn't have been good for you?
Yeah. I asked workers' comp. I was just out of the wheelchair. I hadn't been out of the wheelchair very long. I was able to walk, but I wasn't able to walk very far. So I would go to the mall with my daughter and we could do one store and then I'd be done. I'd be tired, exhausted. We'd go back in the car and my daughter was still wanting to do more stores. And I remember asking my doctor if he could provide a prescription for me for a scooter. And he was kind of quiet for a minute, and then he just said, why don't we see how much more function you get before we give you a scooter?
Mm.
And I remember just feeling really frustrated. I don't think I yelled at him, or I never did that, but I remember inside feeling like he doesn't really understand. You know, I'd love to go to the fair with my family and be able to, you know, do the whole fair, not just, you know, one thing and then go home because I'm so tired. So that was one thing that was difficult.
And what's difficult during that time ends up being a great blessing later, you know. That's how
Yeah.
a lot of
Like
this.
Like the 7-mile hike that I did into 2 alpine lakes with my 2 sons, gaining 3,000 vertical feet, and I think it was 7.5 miles, something like that. And I would have never been able to do that had I been sitting on a scooter, instead of increasing my strength and increasing my strength and increasing my strength over the years. That was probably maybe 2 years after. After let's see how much more function you get.
And ripple effect, right? You know, I'm super grateful for that experience. That never would have happened for you. You know, all 3 of us wouldn't have been able to experience that if it hadn't been,
Right.
you know, not getting a scooter. And so when we see the good in people, you know, when we see what their values are, I'm working with a guy right now. I'll give you an example of this. He started out wanting a pain pump. In fact, he's still kind of contemplating a pain pump. And his value system is not aligned with it. You know, he has someone at church that he knows that has a pain pump that, you know, he basically described him as just non-functioning. You know, he's not even here. He's a big snowmobiler. He loves snowmobiling. He loves time in the outdoors, and all of that he's been told would go away if he were to get a pain pump. And so when I talk to him, you know, I do my best to see the qualities in him and just say stuff like, you know, it doesn't sound like you, you know, not being able to go snowmobiling, not being able to go for a walk. It doesn't sound like it matches who you are.
Right.
And so we want to do our best to just, you know, help people. And I, you know, in your field, I'm sure you get a lot of decisions where you have to decide, does this serve the patient? You know, does this serve them? And sometimes you have to say no to things. If you just say no without like affirming who they are, it can be kind of a dead end, right? Because then they just take it as, oh, they don't want me to get better, right? That's usually the reaction you get.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can align that decision with who they are, I know you, and I know that you really care about this. And, you know, it sounds like this wouldn't really serve you. You know, it can go a long way just to kind of change the whole dynamic, because it's no longer about me versus you, and you're not getting this because I don't agree with it. It is, I care about you, you know, and I see the good in you, and we're going to work through this together. So it's more of a partnership in that way.
That actually happened with, I went to my doctor when I was having really bad chronic pain, this burning nerve pain from the neck down. And I said, I found the perfect medicine, a medication that just takes this burning nerve pain away. And my doctor said, well, what is that? And I said, well, it's Valium. I had an MRI this week and I got really anxious, and I took a Valium, and my chronic pain went away. This burning nerve pain went away. And he just said, you know, Becky, I've been listening to you, and I know what you value. I know you value your family. I know you like to be clear-minded. You like to read and really function in life. And he said, I don't think that's going to give you the life that you want. And, you know, all it was him listening to me and caring about me. I still said, can I please have some for emergencies for when my pain is where I can't take it anymore? And he said yes. And he gave me nine pills. And that was in 2011. And I still have 8 of them. Because, you know, really him calling out my values back to me that really turned around my thinking on it. I might have been a little disappointed, like with the scooter, and had to think it through a little bit. But I think that was a turning point for me.
It's a great example, of having somebody just kind of work with you where you are, and so going back to Albert, since we've been talking about him and some of these examples, are you seeing anything else that's emerging in Albert that might be a good thing? What does someone usually develop who has been through as much as he's been through as far as his strength?
Resiliency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's resilient.
He's going to keep fighting. Keep fighting. He's a fighter.
Absolutely. So bringing this out in Albert, there's a lot to see that's negative here. This is why I gave you this scenario, because it's hard. Albert he's angry. He's hard to work with. He's, probably hard to be around. You just feel like you kind of tense up just hearing what he has to say.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can find some good in him, it sounds like you're really determined to figure this out. You're a problem solver. And that kind of slows everything down, just kind of creates a little bit of a different flow when you can slow things down with people.
I think for me, I see Albert really wanting somebody to take care of this problem for him. He hasn't come to acceptance, but if you were to come at him with that in mind, tell him he just needs to accept it and get over it, I think that would cause him to build a wall for you, be angrier. And so instead, like calling out those strengths, I think that's going to change the conversation.
What helped you find acceptance when you were going through it?
I think I just realized that it was causing me anxiety to not have acceptance. I remember coming to the place where I made a decision not to get on online forums anymore for people with syrinxes, spinal cord syrinxes. It was the angriest group I've ever been on. And, they were demanding that someone come up with a cure for them. They were threatening suicide. They were, it was just, I remember contrasting how that made me feel, just to even be in a group of people like that, as compared to the calmness of the people that were in the functional restoration program. Mm-hmm. They had assured me that calming my nervous system was going to lower my pain and make life more bearable. And I didn't believe them at the time. I remember just thinking, yeah, this works with low back pain and stuff, but I have a syrinx and this is, I remember having some of that going around in my head. But, you finally come to the place where you realize that you're not different than anyone else. Sometimes some of us can think, well, I'm special, I'm different, this is worse than what other people have. And over the years, I've heard that, hundreds of times. My doctor told me this is the worst pain known to man. And I want to say, oh, that was really helpful, wasn't it? But, thinking that way is going to ramp up the nervous system, and acceptance and realizing that this is what I have going on, normalizing and, coming into my new normal with an attitude that there are things that I can do about it. And when I focus on it, it's going to be worse. When I ruminate and have automatic negative thoughts, my brain is going to be releasing stress hormones, which is going to be making it worse. But there are many things that I can do, and acceptance is one of the things that they talked to me about during that program. Mm-hmm. And I remember feeling like this is not something I can ever accept. And I don't think anybody in their right mind should accept this. But giving it a try and feeling the real difference that it made.
So being willing to, that's usually the biggest hurdle, is people often aren't even willing to try. They're just so hardened to where they're at. And so our task often is just to soften them up a little bit, give them a chance to soften by acknowledging who they are, and I think we see people become identified with so many things that have been through something like Albert's been through.
Yeah.
He could become identified with being being disabled, or being having chronic pain, or being unemployed, or being a failure in life. I mean, there's all kinds of things that Albert could get attached to and say, this is just who I am now.
Mm-hmm.
And what we want to do is help Albert make a shift and realize who he really is. And Albert is resilient, Albert is a problem solver. Albert is knowledgeable,
Hardworking.
And that's a form of love, right? When you're working hard for your family.
Mm-hmm.
He's loving, he's compassionate, cares about others,
and willing to vocalize how he's feeling about something.
Mm-hmm. So he's assertive. He's
assertive. Yes.
He's aggressive at his worst, but maybe he's assertive at his best.
Mm-hmm.
And there's probably many things we would learn about Albert if we were to just begin to affirm him and begin to see the good in him that would come to light, and you wouldn't see this really nasty, mean version of Albert going forward, because Albert would be more, more in tune with the good qualities within himself. And that comes from somebody recognizing it. I think we all remember, when someone sees the good in you. If you had a teacher in school, maybe you struggled in certain areas, and if you had a teacher that kind of took you under their wing and saw the good in you and helped you develop, that's the kind of person you never forget because of how they made you feel. And it can give you real confidence to go out and try in the world, to try your best and to work towards something good. And these are the people we often see return to work in a meaningful capacity.
Mm-hmm.
I've had some clients that have gone on to do some really neat things with their lives. Some that stay stuck, some people, it takes some time, but often people come into something better as a result of that. So we wanted to, go ahead.
Well, one thing I wanted to say is that one of the reasons why when I started out, I did a year-long program, which I know sounded really long to a lot of people, was that I could see that it takes time for people to come to acceptance. And Paul, maybe you can tell the story of the lady that had an amputation, or that was wanting an amputation on her foot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's such a slow game, So this woman had chronic regional pain syndrome, which is, known as a really terrible and mysterious disease. They don't know much about it. There's a lot of strange things about it that there aren't a lot of answers to. And so she was really looking for answers. She just wanted this pain to go away. And she was pretty functional. She was still working, able to work, but just living in unbearable pain. And so she, looking for solutions, one of the solutions she came across was to amputate her leg, amputate the part of her body that was in pain. And those of us that know about pain science, we know that that doesn't work, because pain is not just in the sensations that we feel in the body, right? Pain is this, something that happens in the brain and at deeper levels within us. But here she was, pretty dug in on the idea of wanting to amputate her leg. And so I coached her for a whole year, and we worked on a lot of tools for coping with pain, for coping with stress, for sleeping better, for, finding better ways to eat and better ways to move. What was really cool with her, she didn't have use of her legs, right? She couldn't walk regularly, but she could kayak. And so she ended up getting in a kayak and doing some of that. That was just amazing. She found ways to function in spite of that pain. And she still kept talking about amputating her leg. It was something that would come up at every session, every week. She'd talk about, I'm talking to this doctor and scheduled to meet with him and talk about this operation. And we got to her very last day. And on the last day, we always do kind of a summary and go over some of the things she's accomplished during her time in the coaching, talk about next steps and where she wants to go in life. And, it's just kind of a bookend on everything that she's worked on and accomplished. So we went over all the great things she had done. And I expected her to say, I still want to pursue this, this amputation. And unprompted, I don't even think I asked her about it. She just said, and I've come to the realization that I'm strong enough to go through this. I'm strong enough to live with this. And I've decided that I don't want to amputate my leg anymore. And just one of those, I don't know, it was one of those moments that just really hit me because it wasn't something I was expecting. But that seed that we had planted, a year prior, grew into something. It started to sprout through the surface, and that's the way I think of this stuff. It's a seed that we're putting in the soil, and we're doing our best to water it, give it some love, and hoping that something grows from it. So
That's such a beautiful story. I love that story. It's the seed of seeing the good in her, of calling out her strengths, of deeply listening to her, of walking beside her as she tried to make good decisions for her life. That's really beautiful.
So we're going to work on planting a little seed. We're going to have Becky do a little scenario for us. Give us a statement that you might hear from some of your patients that are struggling, that are either, too far in the end of compliant, or they're just kind of going with the flow and going along with whatever happens, not really taking initiative, or maybe more in defiance where they're angry or blaming. And we're going to practice responses to them that really, I don't know, I guess build them up in some way, or at least empathize or can acknowledge the struggle they're going through. So do you want to give us maybe a little rant here?
Sure. I'm happy to. I have been trying and trying to get a hold of you, and I haven't been able to get a hold of you. And now we're finally talking, and I've just been dealing with this pain. My doctor has tried all kinds of different medications. None of them work. So I don't know. I feel like I'm at the end of my rope. Is there anything else we can do? Because I've just had it. I'm not able to sleep at night. I'm just laying in a recliner most of the day. My daughter comes home from school and I'm still in my bathrobe, and I'm really discouraged. I don't think there's going to be an answer for this pain.
You sound like you're someone that really needs to find an answer to this, and you're really willing to do whatever it takes to figure that out.
Yeah, I'm willing, but it doesn't seem like there is an answer. I have a good doctor. He's trying, but I'm at the end.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to live life and do things with my family. And they all went bowling the other night, and I was hurting so bad. I just laid in the recliner, and then I just laid there and cried the whole time they were gone.
You'd love to be involved with that. You like going out and doing those things.
Yeah, I basically majorly have FOMO.
Mm-hmm.
I like to be with my family. I like to be doing what they're doing, and I'm just having to sit at home while everybody else is doing life, and life is just going by. And I'm sitting here in my recliner hurting all the time.
People that have FOMO are usually the ones that kind of hold everybody together. They're kind of the glue that holds the whole crew together. And so I'm sure they were missing you as much as you're missing them.
I know my husband was really sad when he got home and saw me being sad. Because when he left, I'm like, oh, it's fine. I'll be fine. And then the door closed and I wasn't fine.
All right, let's open this up to those of you that are listening in here. How would you respond? I gave you a couple examples of how you might respond, but I want to hear from you. How would you respond to someone who's in this place? What would you say?
I know from talking to a lot of adjusters over the years, and I know that they get the brunt of a lot of anger.
Mm.
They take, I remember talking to one lady, she said, I don't know what you're doing with him and your coaching, but I'm not getting those middle of the night screaming, yelling, cussing messages when I get to work in the morning. So that's a good thing. And I'm like, oh, that's terrible that somebody would do that, that somebody would would just feel comfortable just blasting someone in that way. But
Yeah. Yeah, it's really hard. It's hard to be in that place.
Anastasia said, pain is very frustrating and can slow you down. Can you try a schedule of getting up and always taking a shower and getting dressed by 10?
Okay. That's really, Anastasia, I really appreciate what you did in kind of empathizing with the pain. Pain is frustrating, can slow you down. One tip I'll give on this, because this is something I used to do, is when, and I think we're all trained to do this from very young, when you're in third grade or even first grade or kindergarten, when you're learning basic math, what are we taught to solve? We're taught to solve problems. We have to solve the problem. And I'm sure working as an adjuster, case manager, whatever role you're in, there's this real pressure to solve the problem. And one thing I like to encourage people to do, just to create a shift, is to, maybe step away for a bit from trying to solve the problem. Because people in this place, and Mom, I know you know this from experience, everybody wants to give you a book or give you a solution to your problem. And we can feel that pressure. I know as a coach, I feel that pressure all the time to I just want to help them get out of this suffering. Mm-hmm. And it's really helped me to see their challenges as a learning experience. Right. And so if everybody gave them the solution to every problem, they would never learn how to cope. They never learn how to manage their stress. They never learn how to calm their nervous system. They never learn how to kayak instead of walk, like my client did. She went out and did it. And so we need to be a little bit careful about suggesting things to do. And instead of trying to help them come up with a solution and an action step, remember these action steps come after someone really connects with the strengths within them, right? So someone who is able to get up and take a shower and get dressed by 10 is someone who has what quality?
Grit, determination.
Grit, determination, courage. I'm actually working, I worked with a woman who, one of her big challenges was showering. She'd taken sponge baths for, her caretaker would give her sponge baths for years. It had been several years since she had a shower because she was scared. She was afraid to do it. And so one day we started talking about this, and she found the courage to, the next time I talked to her, she's like, I had the courage to go take a shower. It just felt amazing. And she did that. She was on a roll with that for a long time, where she'd shower twice a week, even though, it was very scary for her to get up and move and stand in the shower and very afraid of falling and everything. But her courage came out in a way that allowed her to get up and go shower. And it did a lot for her self-esteem. And so we want that to come from them. And so what we want to do first, before we suggest what to do, we need to affirm who they are. So work with the who first, and then the what, the things that happen after that will come naturally. So thanks for your example, Anastasia. I appreciate that.
What would you say, Paul?
What would I say to your example?
Mm-hmm.
I gave a couple examples of some things I might say. You might also, it's easy for me because I know you pretty well. I'm kind of cheating. I got a cheat sheet here, but with you, just seeing you as someone who is whole, right? Instead of seeing people as broken or ruined, it sounds like this whole experience is like it's brought to life some new resolve for you. You sound really determined to make something different happen, mm-hmm. and to go on these bowling adventures. So what do you think it might take to do that? That's another way to evoke a little bit of change here. What do you think it would take for you to go with them next time they go?
Well, one thing I realized as I was sitting at home crying was I could have been sitting watching bowling, mm-hmm. and had just as much fun, or had, actually had fun instead of having a pity party at home. Mm-hmm. And, you can hurt at home, you can hurt at the bowling alley.
I've had a lot of people say that same thing.
Yeah, and I did make a decision. That was a pivotal point for me. I made a decision that I was just going to go ahead and try to do things. And that was before I had my pain figured out. Obviously, that was before I went through functional restoration and learned about the brain and pain and, you know, calming the nervous system and everything. And everything I was doing was ramping up my nervous system. I mean, you know, you think, what does it do when you sit in a recliner and cry for 2 hours? you're in fight or flight for 2 hours. So, you know, going to the bowling alley is not going to give me more pain. I didn't understand all of that, but I knew that I wanted to be part of what my family was doing. So I made a bit of more of an effort after that.
Yeah. So you found your resolve, you found the determination to do it, and kind of some clarity. You know, you became aware of the situation, and so often that awareness of what is actually happening here is what helps people change. Being able to see reality. You know, someone who's angry and frustrated, they're not able to see reality, and so, you know, someone that's working with them has the ability to have conversations with them on a regular basis, can help them see the real, you know, the reality, by reflecting what they're seeing, you know. And so instead of, you know, asking a question about what they can do, you can frame it in a more reflective way that comes from them. And that's probably beyond the scope of what we're doing today, but I really appreciate you guys taking time out of your day to be with us and to share, you know, some of your thoughts on it. And if there's any questions you want to put in the chat, or if you want to get in touch with Becky or I and explore this further, you know, feel free to reach out via email. We love what you guys do. I know it's a huge, challenging job that you have, and really appreciate all the work you do with people that are suffering and struggling.
I just appreciate everyone showing up, and I think how we create a you know, compliance is, or, you know, purpose in helping people see what their strengths are, calling out those strengths, walking beside them as they're trying to turn things around. It's beautiful work. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, happy to be here. All right, well, thanks everybody for attending, and have a great rest of your day.